If you're a single person, you're more likely to find a partner, or at least someone to date, online than by using any other method. And by 2035, it's estimated that 50% of relationships will start online. I remember being a single person, and I feel that if at that point there had been Tinder and all of the various other hookup apps and dating apps, I might have found myself in a world of bewilderment. If you're living as a single person in a kind of carousel of online dating and it's leading you to a state of despair, here's why that might be.
Experts say these dating apps keep people locked in an endless cycle of matches and rejections, and many end up feeling more disconnected and lonely than before.
A lot of the times I was constantly checking my notifications every time I would try to do homework or something, and once I hear the sound, I would constantly look at my phone.
I'm pretty glad, that I'm not immersed in this world, because that phone is a portal to so much possibility, even if you're not looking for something as evocative, provocative and effective as dating and all that might lead to: emotional fulfillment, sex, distraction, pleasure, validation. I suppose what dating apps rely on is the fact that we don't really scrutinize and imagine and personally investigate what it is we're looking for when we're imagining a romantic solution to our problems. Of course, there are a few people that are happy with absolute solitude, and it's, I suppose, literally natural to look for a partner. But when them kind of natural yearnings meet an interface that is so potent and can offer you so much possibility, it's very difficult to remain calm or rational and not to sort of fall into a kind of rabbit hole of overstimulation and bewilderment.
I think part of the game is trying to figure out what the other person wants. And then that's when you win, is when the person says yes, I see what you're selling me and I want it.
When I think of now, if you watch any TV event, like a sporting event or just a TV show, you'll see that most of the adverts are technology adverts in various forms, and there's a kind of gamification of culture, betting everywhere, loads of literal online games, and a kind of an attitude of acquisition and commodification that can be applied to almost anything, and it's clearly applied to dating. The idea that we all objectify one another, I suppose, is kind of accepted as normal and as an extension of beauty routine and self-beautification, that we present ourselves as objects to one another and are treated as objects. I suppose when you live in a culture that requires normal socializing, or I suppose customary socializing through normal means, meeting, that we'll be confronted with each other's humanity much more quickly, and the objectification is kind of diluted by the awareness of people's quirks, ordinariness and extraordinariness. You can't continue to look at someone as a fantastic figure, a kind of symbol of personal fulfillment, only regarded through the lens of your own needs. Once you meet them, you find out people of I've got asthma, I hurt my leg as a child, my brother's working in Dubai. Peculiar little details prevent you from looking at people as a kind of flat canvas of your own wanting. But if you're meeting people online on dating apps, and everything's accompanied by that little noise that geezer made,
once I hear the sound,
and a sort of a sense of adrenalized longing, then I think that further disrupts your natural human understanding that what you're dealing with in a way is someone that's basically like you.
So I think part of the burnout just comes from being overwhelmed by choices, having too many opportunities, not actually meeting up with people, and engaging with our phones more so than with each other.
Forget dating apps, man. I have to have a program around my phone, full stop. I can't keep looking at that thing. I have to place it out of my reach. I only look at it at particular times of day now. I feel like I'm addicted to it. I look at it when I don't want to. I feel worse after I look at it. If that was also linked to feelings of loneliness or sexual longing or unworthiness, which I'm sure it is in some less obvious way, but if it was in a very literal and blatant manner, I think I'd find that really, really challenging. If you're a person that's I suppose of any age and you're using those dating apps, the problem I feel is that you're trapped in something that's potentially limitless while looking for an absolute solution. It's ridiculous in any context to think that another person can make you feel better, can complete your life, can heal the wound within you. But when you're inundated with potential partners and potential opportunities, it's a lot harder to reach the kind of clarity that one requires to navigate your way through life, to avoid the pitfalls of thinking that any external thing can ever fulfill you, complete you, or even reliably distract you for any reasonable amount of time.
There's a problem that social scientists have named the paradox of choice, and that is that we think having lots of choices would be amazing and get us exactly what we want. But it turns out, in many things, the more choices we have, the more miserable we become.
Barry Schwartz, author of The Paradox of Choice, said, learning to choose is hard, learning to choose well is harder, learning to choose well in a world of unlimited possibilities is harder still, perhaps too hard. And again, this is an idea that's long been discussed in consumerism, the kind of hypnotic paralysis of standing in an aisle in a supermarket looking at 1,000 types of peanut butter and thinking, I don't fucking know what to do about this. I don't even know if I need peanut butter anymore. If you apply that to something that's primal, like your need for a mate or your desire for a mate, then I feel like something that is overstimulating becomes almost implausible. A study found that continued access to an almost limitless pool of potential partners when online dating has negative side effects. It makes people more pessimistic and rejecting in general. I've noticed that if I spend too much time looking at screens, and I think a side effect of lockdown in general has been that normal human interaction has become a little more startling. I guess I live a relatively insular life, young children, sort of, I guess, a closed off working environment in loads and loads of ways. So for me, again, if you're spending a lot of time in a virtual world, the real world starts to seem somehow abstract. You kind of invert your values. Relationship expert Patrick Wanis said, "We are hardwired to bond, unite and form connections with people. Rejection results in the loss of connection and instead creates the sense of feeling isolated, cut off, disconnected, unwanted, unloved or inferior." I look at the comments sometimes when I do videos on these subjects, and I know that people feel that. A lot of isolation, a sense of loss. And I think it's a bigger problem than just dating. I think it's to do with the loss of meaning, and it's easy to invest meaning in the idea of a relationship because it's so popularized, normalized, literally romanticized, and we see examples of relationships all around us. And because sexual desire is a normal, natural, inherent part of most people's lives, you have an inner resource that you can reliably return to ratify your feelings that the answer to the problem is some other person. But my belief, and more importantly, it's been sort of explored in various strands of psychology and psychiatry, is that that is a kind of projection and displacement of a yearning for something higher, transcendent and purposeful in your life. And my experience has been that until I started to find meaning beyond my own desires, I was locked into a cycle of kind of despair and despondency in various ways, including behavior around pornography and sex and drugs and food, all kinds of cycles of dependency. Stuff that's natural and potentially life-affirming like sex or food. It's much harder to navigate that territory. Something like drugs or alcohol, you just have to stop it. But dating, you know, when I was younger, dating in this kind of way, like, you know, Lonely Hearts ads, or what was it? I can't even remember the name of it, like internet dating and match-ups. It was sort of regarded as a kind of shameful thing. In order for it to become a successful business, the shame component had to be removed, and there's nothing wrong with that. Why should people be ashamed of anything other than obvious things, really? But the problem is that allied to a commodification model presents, I think, a kind of spiral mentality, something that can potentially continue limitlessly.
Why is it making us more lonely to have all these options?
This phenomenon of de-individuation, and the expert sort of alluded to it on camera earlier.
De-individuation?
De-individuation. So when you're on your phone, you are shielded by your screen. Yeah. Your avatar is your proxy, and there's a veil of anonymity. So people are likely to engage in behaviors that they might not in real life. And so over time, you know, you begin to treat other people not as people, but as objects or as options.
Whether you believe in God or universal truths or not, most of us recognize that we evolved for certain conditions, and we lived in certain, let's say, tribal conditions where we knew 100 to 150 people for tens and thousands of years. Civilized cultures, settled cultures, post-agricultural living is a relatively, in terms of evolution, modern phenomenon. We've yet to fully evolve into the conditions we live in. What I mean to say is that our impulses and our instincts, our needs and our desires, our factory settings are still designed for a life where you don't meet loads and loads of people, where you live a life of purpose, even if that's dedicated to survival, where you're naturally connected to your environment and understand yourself to be part of it. As we live in a more and more post-industrial, technological society, we're becoming abstracted from ourselves. And this kind of dating app, the same as like pornography, I suppose, is a way of resourcing a very primal, organic and powerful energy and placing it in the hands of a sort of a limitless algorithm that can lead you off or suspend you in a potentially unfulfillable situation. Probably part of the algorithm of dating apps is looking at sort of the best way to sustain users, and if every single person just meets someone, falls in love and leaves the app, I guess that wouldn't be a sustainable model. There's probably a particular demographic that use dating apps and continue to use them and belong to a whole host of them, and that's the kind of lifeblood of this dating app. I'm not being necessarily cynical about the capitalist component of this, because I think it's sort of more complicated than that, and I think really it's an expression of a mindset that began long ago. And I think the key problem is, and this is the place where you can address it as an individual, in spite of the powerful opposition, i.e. the mentality of commodification that's prevalent in these apps but also elsewhere in our culture, in fact perhaps it's the foundation of our culture, is find within yourself a sense of fulfillment. Nothing wrong with having a relationship. Why not have a relationship? But first of all, I suppose what we have to do, and I wish I'd known this when I was a lot younger, is find a sense of peace and ease within yourself by belonging to a community that has a shared sense of meaning, by having things in your life that are not about constant self-fulfillment, by not spending your whole life staring at a screen, even this one when it's got me on it, although I would argue that that's a relatively good use of your screen time, and recognizing that you will ultimately meet people, various people, find a way of living that makes you feel fulfilled and connected. But ultimately, the people, phenomena and things that are outside of yourself cannot ever fulfill the sense of need and separation that you have. This is, I would say, almost by definition, a spiritual problem, this idea of connection. And by investing your time and money and effort in either sexualized or romanticized pursuit of another person you think can fulfill or complete you will only lead to disappointment. Maybe if you are a person who uses dating apps a lot, recognize what you're doing. Stay present when you're looking at it. Imagine every single one of those people and their grandparents and their ancestors stretching back into limitless time. Well, not limitless time, I suppose there's an origin of our species. Imagine them having children and descendants into the future. Imagine the relative insignificance of your own desires and your own needs in this moment, and the ridiculousness of positing your focus and attention into this very specific pixelated world of wanting and need. In short, reconnect with your own nature, reconnect with external nature, and do not allow these screens to become a magnet for your time and your attention and your precious, unique individual life. If you like that video, press like, subscribe to it, watch more of this stuff where I try to find a positive and spiritual analysis of situations that can be complex, distracting, and even troubling. Comment below, tell us what kind of things you'd like to see videos on, because we read them and we make videos on that basis. And if you want to listen to my podcast where I have deep conversations with people on a variety of subjects once a week, have a look at Apple and look for Luminary podcast. There's a link in the description below. My podcast Under the Skin and my other podcast Above the Noise, where I do guided meditations, are available for something like $2.99 a month on Apple, wherever you are in the world. One every week of each. Thank you very much, and stop swiping.